If this video showed up for you, maybe it's because silence has become company. Maybe you've been holding in too much words, pain, secrets, not because you wanted to, but because the world never really knew how to listen. Today, I don't want you to speak. I just want you to feel understood, because sometimes what we need isn't advice, it's comfort. And this video is a safe place for those who learn to stay quiet. There was a time I believed that being honest was enough, that if I explained things properly, calmly, clearly, people would understand, that if I opened my heart, they'd take care of it. It was almost like a belief, the belief that transparency brings connection, that telling the truth, even while shaking inside, was the shortest path to the comfort I needed. So I spoke. I shared intimate things. Things I didn't always understand myself, but I trusted that by sharing, something in me would ease. Until one day, it didn't. It hurt more. It was a small moment, almost trivial, but it left invisible marks. I shared an old pain, one of those we carry in silence, trying to appear strong. And the person, instead of listening with their soul, listened with judgment. They didn't say anything cruel, but the way they looked at me afterwards, it was like invisible scissors, slowly cutting away at my trust. In that moment, without a word, I learned. Not everyone deserves to know our wounds. Some people don't heal, they just touch, to remind you they're in control. And we're left there, caught between shock and silence, unsure whether to retreat or keep trying to be seen. After turning 50, that became even clearer, because life, when it teaches through pain, always leaves a scar. So I kept things in, not out of weakness, but for protection. Holding things in became a shield, a way to keep the parts of me that still had some light intact. And there, I discovered something that stayed with me ever since. Speaking is a luxury. It's a gift we offer to those who've proven they can listen without wounding. These days, I still feel the urge to share what I feel. But first I observe, I wait, I listen to the tone, the timing, the gaze, and only open up when my heart feels safe. Because after explaining myself so many times and still not being understood, after trying to be real and being misinterpreted, I accepted a quiet truth. Sometimes, the only place where our story is truly respected is within the silence we learned to build. And for a while, that's where I lived. At first, holding things in felt like the mature choice. Like someone who learns to walk barefoot on gravel, I got used to the discomfort. It felt better to stay quiet than to try explaining again. Better to smile than risk the discomfort of opening up and being misunderstood. And for a while, it worked. I felt a quiet pride in being able to carry everything myself. The hurt, the questions, the longing to be heard as someone who matters, not as someone who's a burden. But the body doesn't forget what the mouth refuses to say. And what once felt like strength began to weigh like a secret that was never mine to carry. One day I woke up with a strange kind of sadness, not from memories. It was the fatigue of having nowhere to put them, as if every gesture, every unspoken word had turned into a brick, and I was carrying an entire house on my back, built only from silence. It's hard to explain that to someone who's never lived it, but those over 50 understand. There are pains that don't cry anymore. They just settle in. They become the weight in your eyes. The long sigh in an empty room. The soft nausea no one can explain. Sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary conversation, I'd drift off, thinking about what got stuck in my throat, what no one saw, what maybe no one ever will. Holding things in was survival, but eventually, not having anyone to tell became another kind of loneliness. You start smiling automatically at family gatherings. You answer all good, even when there's a knot in your soul. You learn to hide so well. You forget what it's like to be truly seen. After 50, we accumulate what didn't fit before, the silences that saved us, and the ones that wounded us from within. And suddenly, it's not the memory that hurts anymore. It's the silence. It's knowing you still feel, but can't remember how to express it. And when that silence begins to hurt more than the memory itself, it's because something inside you is asking for air, but no longer knows how to ask. For a long time, I told myself that holding things in was wisdom. that not revealing everything at once was a sign of maturity. And in a way, that was true. Not everything needs to be said. Not every pain should become a story in the hands of someone who can't listen. Protecting what still pulses inside us is also an act of self-love. But one day, alone at home, rummaging through an old box in the back of a cupboard, I came across fragments of myself, letters I never sent, photos I'd hidden even from me, notes written during moments when my heart still believed it would be understood. And there, in that quiet meeting with my past self, I realized something I'd never noticed before. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was hiding from the disappointment of trying again and not being seen, hiding from the risk of trusting and being met with indifference, hiding from the shame of feeling too much in a world that rewards those who feel too little. After 50, we become experts at pretending. We learn to say all good with ease, to ration our laughter, to measure our affection, to hide our scars like they're flaws, instead of survival marks. But there's a line, a thin, almost invisible line between protecting yourself and making a habit of hiding. I crossed that line without noticing. I began to stay silent, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. I began denying my feelings not for peace, but to avoid seeming ridiculous. I started living on autopilot, avoiding being seen, but also never truly meeting myself. And that's when I realized holding too much in is its own kind of addiction, an addiction for those who are tired of trying to explain where it hurts. And the question that kept echoing inside me was this: am I still holding back out of care, or is it just fear of remembering how much it still hurts? We hide so much to avoid being hurt that one day we lose the way back to ourselves. It wasn't a grand moment. There were no tears falling, no background music. It was during a simple lunch, one of those you barely notice, until someone asks in a different way, "And you, how have you really been feeling?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds. The usual answer was ready on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, all good. But inside, something resisted. It wasn't a desire to pour everything out. It was just the exhaustion of pretending. But I didn't want to say too much either, and walk away with another painful silence. So I did something I'd never done before. I shared just a piece, what I could manage, without fully exposing myself, but also without completely hiding. I didn't tell everything, but I told enough to not betray myself. And in that middle ground, I discovered something no one had ever taught me. The truth doesn't need to come all at once to be honest. You can be sincere without bleeding. You can share without falling apart. I learned that opening a window is different from throwing all the doors wide open, and that sometimes maturity is exactly that, wisely choosing what to reveal and what to keep. Not out of fear, but out of care, because not every silence is avoidance, and not every word brings healing. That day, I wasn't strong. I was whole. For the first time, I respected my own limits. I spoke with honesty, but also with love for myself. After 50, we start to see that not everyone needs to know everything, that some pain does need to be met with care, but not always from the outside. That's when I began to understand. Holding in everything is heavy. Telling everything is risky, but choosing what to say can be freeing. And it was in that balance that, for the first time, I felt there was still room inside me to breathe. Over time, I learned that not every silence is empty. Some are gardens, private places where the soul rests, where pain can breathe without needing to explain itself. After 50, we understand that healing isn't about going back to who we were. It's about honoring what changed. It's accepting that not everything can be fixed with words, and that some wounds ask for silence, not out of fear, but out of tenderness. For a long time, I thought I had to tell everything to prove trust, that being transparent was a duty with those I loved, and that keeping something to myself meant there was something wrong with me. But I discovered there are truths that only need an internal embrace. Things that don't need to be said to be real. Hurts that, when gently held by ourselves, dissolve without a sound. Today I choose more carefully what I show, not out of suspicion, but because I finally understand the value of preserving what is still being rebuilt. There are parts of me that are still fragile, and not every gaze deserves access. Not every ear deserves to hear what took so much for me to understand. I learned that real connections survive silence, and people who truly love you recognize even what isn't said. Holding back stopped being a prison. It became sacred space, a place where I can breathe without explaining myself. Maturity didn't make me more closed off. It made me more discerning, and that was one of the most beautiful healings I found in myself. Not opening wounds for those who have no remedy, not staying quiet out of fear, but out of respect for what I feel. Today, I am the refuge I always looked for in others, and knowing that brought me back a kind of peace I'd forgotten existed. If you've made it this far, it's because there's a kind of silence no one sees, but it weighs like stone on the chest. And even so, you've kept going, day after day, taking deep breaths, pretending you're fine, while inside, almost everything was crying out for comfort that never came. But now, I want to tell you something. Calmly and clearly, you are not broken. You're just tired of pretending not to feel. Maybe you've spent a lifetime trying to be light for others, trying to be too strong, too understanding, too quiet. And little by little, you started storing things. Storing the tears no one noticed. Storing the anger no one welcomed. Even storing the joy you had no one to share with. But holding too much wears you out. And no one came into this world to be a cabinet for pain. After 50, what we want most is peace. But peace isn't the absence of sound, it's the freedom to be, without needing to justify it. It's being able to say, I'm feeling fragile today, without fear of rejection. It's being able to go quiet and still be loved. You don't need to carry it all alone anymore. Not everything needs to be spoken, but everything can and should be held. First, by you, because life, despite the time, is still inviting you to let go, to rest this chest that's been screaming inside, to reconnect with the part of you that you locked away just because no one knew how to care for it. You still have time, time to take a deep breath, to return to yourself gently, to stop needing to prove yourself. Because now, maybe for the first time, you'll understand. It's not too late to be whole. It's only too late to keep pretending it doesn't hurt. If this video touched a part of you that was forgotten, quiet, hidden, leave a sign, a leaf, a breath, leave a comment. I read each one as if opening letters that never arrived. Tell me, what have you learned to keep that saved you? And if this space made sense to you, subscribe to the channel. Here, every silence has a voice. Every pain gets time to become a path. Because yes, you still have time.